Right, trying to go live on Instagram. How's it going, everybody? This is our second Jazz and Jesus live stream. Should be going live here in a second. And you can already tell things look a little different. I got the fancy lighting behind me. Um, yeah, got the fancy lighting. I've got, um, I'm a little further back from the camera this time. And I'm trying to resist the very millennial urge that I have to check and see that everything is recording and everything is going well. Uh, it looks like it's at least on Instagram and on YouTube. So, anyways, we're gonna get going. Today, the topic for today's live stream is a little bit of a self-aggrandizing topic, but it is my musical background. I want to talk a little bit about my musical background because I've gotten questions over the years about that. And most of the time, I'm going to be talking about something in the church, something in theology. But today, I wanted to talk about my musical background instead, a little bit. I'm going to play for you guys too. Play for you guys, take your questions, that whole deal, right? So, I was born in 1995, which, like I said, technically makes me a millennial, right on that cusp, right? I was born November 8th, 1995, in Glendale, Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. Grew up in Glendale, Arizona. And I grew up in a lower middle class household. And my dad was and still is a music teacher. He's about 2 years out from retiring now. And he was the first person who taught me anything about music. I remember as far back as I can remember, he would sing to me, when I was an infant and he was putting me to sleep, very sweet. He would play like videos back then, you had VHSs and he would play VHSs where they would go through and name all the instruments in the orchestra, right? And he taught me how to sing solfege, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. And it was at about the age of, I think it was 2 or 3, where my mom started to notice that I just had this proclivity towards music. We had a piano, and at the age of 2, even, I was climbing on the piano bench and trying to play notes on the piano. I was interested in everything musical. My room was filled with small little musical instruments. And so when my dad noticed and my mom noticed that I was interested, my mom also plays piano, and she started teaching me at the age of 3 how to read music, how to read very basic sheet music. And my dad, who also, again, plays piano, so I do come from a musical family, my dad started teaching me chords. He started teaching me how to play chords at the age of 3, just putting my hands in position, my left hand, and having me play a C chord. And then move up the keyboard like that, and back down. And the first song, like actual kind of song I ever remember learning, I think about 3 or 4, was the theme from Titanic, and it was this arrangement. It was something like that. Maybe not that exact arrangement, but a very simple arrangement of the theme from Titanic. That's the first song I ever remember learning. And again, that was around that age of 3 or 4. And I just became obsessed with the piano, obsessed with musical instruments. The funny thing is that when I was 3 or 4, I wanted to be a musician when I grew up. I knew I did. But I wanted to be a professional trumpet player, which is just so funny and random because I don't actually play trumpet at all today. So that's the irony of that. But for some reason, I was obsessed with the trumpet. That never happened. But I continued with piano. And eventually, as I got into school age, my parents didn't really get me lessons. They just kind of let me go off on my own and do my own thing. I knew how to play chords. I knew how to read basic sheet music. And they just kind of were like, we have music in the piano, so, inside the piano bench. So just go start learning it. And so I started to teach myself stuff that was there in the piano bench. And we didn't have money for private lessons. And so, other than the instruction that I got from my parents very early on, I didn't take them. I didn't take them. When I was 8 years old, I was attending the school that my dad was a music teacher at. And we had a very sad thing happen, which was that he was falsely accused of misconduct with other students. He took a polygraph. He tried to clear his name, but parents of these students that spread false rumors demanded that he be fired. He resigned from that school, and because of that, I had to leave that school, and our family went through a very tumultuous time. My dad ended up getting a job in Germany at a missionary school called Black Forest Academy. And we had to raise support to go to this school, because it was more or less a missionary job. At some point, I may share more about this in more detail. But for today, as far as how that applies to my musical background, the year before we moved to Germany, we had to put our house up for rent. So we put our house up for rent, and we moved in with my grandma, my dad's mom, who had recently had a stroke that paralyzed half of her body. So we moved in with my grandma, and my mom became her full-time caregiver. It was an extremely difficult time for my family. Like I said, I was about 9, when this happened, 3rd, 4th grade. And I had to move. I had to leave my school. I had to leave the neighborhood that I'd grown up in. Again, we moved with my grandma who lived across town. And I didn't have friends in the neighborhood or anything like that. And so when I would get home from school, I had to move schools too, make all new friends, which was very hard for me to do. But when I would get home from school, I didn't have any friends in the neighborhood. And my parents were preoccupied because my mom was taking care of my grandma. And my dad had to cobble together jobs. And so during that time, I had a small little keyboard that we had taken with us to my grandma's. And I would spend hours and hours playing the keyboard at her house. It was like I would get my homework done, and then it was just like, that's what I'm going to be doing, is just playing keyboard, playing piano. And during that time was when I started to, I wrote my first song technically when I was like 6 or 7, so a couple years before that point. It's really cute. It's called A Thanksgiving Song was the name of it. And it kind of sounded like this. Let's see if So that was like the first song I ever wrote, and obviously it sounds like a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old wrote it. And then when we moved in with my grandma, like I said, a couple years later, when I was 8, 9-ish, then I started writing other songs. I started writing songs with words. Now, again, I don't really have any of the words I wrote during that time, but I started to use chords that were a little bit more interesting. I started playing in keys like other than the key of C, like the key of E. Right. And also during that time, in addition to writing songs, I was doing that. But the other thing I was doing was I was hearing a lot of songs on Christian radio, or the Christian CDs we had, lying around my grandma's house. And so I was hearing a lot of songs off Christian radio or from those Christian CDs, and I would put them on, and then I would try to play along to them. I would try to play along to them, melody and chords. And so, I'm trying to think of songs from, that time period. Like, That's You Found Me by FFH. Trying to think. I mean, there's like Stephen Curtis Chapman, Michael W. Smith. So I was just playing along with the CDs that we had in our house, or with things that I would hear on Christian radio. There was all those Christian worship songs like, I don't know, like Open the Eyes of My Heart. Just kind of like basic diatonic chords, right? Like chords within the key and just a simple melody on top of it. And that's what I was kind of learning to do. I hadn't, really been jazz trained or had any significant classical training or anything like that. I was just hearing songs on the radio and then doing my best to translate them to the keyboard on my own by ear, melody and chords. And so I just spent, again, hours and hours and hours doing that. And my parents kind of noticed that that was happening. So we moved to Germany. We attended that school. I attended the school BFA, Black Forest Academy, and my dad was the music teacher at that school as well. And the cool thing about BFA in Germany was that they had free piano lessons. So I got to take free private piano lessons through the school. And that was when I really first had like official piano lessons that weren't from either of my parents and weren't from being self-taught. I was probably about 9 when I first started taking piano lessons from somebody who wasn't my parents. And the teacher there, she was an amazing woman named Suzanne Morton. And she started teaching me more classical technique. The funny thing is, so I started going through like the book series, like the Faber method books and stuff like that. The funny thing is that at the time, I started to develop this like proclivity towards ragtime. When I was like 9, 10 years old. I might have to move the mic to play this. But there was a piece that I really liked to play when I was probably about 10, called Roll Over Rag. And I'll see if I can remember it. And I also taught myself during that time part of Maple Leaf Rag as well. I printed off the sheet music and I taught myself the like main part of that, I guess. So let's see if I can point the camera down and play those two for you. Roll Over Rag, and then the part of Maple Leaf Rag that I learned at that time. Point it down. Come on. Let's do it. Oh, come on. Is it being difficult? Gotta move my credit card out of the way. The camera's being difficult, isn't it? Yep, it is. Okay. So you don't get to see my hands for this. For those of you wondering, sorry, that was so sketchy. For those of you wondering, like, why I don't have two cameras, I do have two cameras. I tried to plug in the second one and the computer crashed. So that's what's going on. I'm going to have to fix that issue, obviously. So I'm going to play and you're not going to be able to see my hands, but that's okay. I'm just going to move the mic out of the way. This is Roll Over Rag. See, I played it when I was 10, so you gotta give me a break, okay? It's been years. like that. And then here's the part of Maple Leaf Rag. Okay, anyways. So that was Rollover Rag and Maple Leaf Rag. Again, sorry that I couldn't show my hands and you had to awkwardly look at my face while I was playing that. I'm going to fix that problem for the next live stream. We are still working out all the kinks to this. But anyways. And so, I want to make sure I'm centered in the frame. Nope, that's the other way. Here we go. Yep. So, yeah, those were a couple of the pieces that I learned in Germany. Also some other classical pieces. I'm sure I learned like... Whatever that piece is, I'm sure I learned that. And like other simple classical pieces, you know. So on and so forth. And then we came back from Germany. So we came back from Germany when I was about 12. And I went into the 7th grade. And then at that point, my parents were doing a little bit better financially, so they could afford piano lessons, like actual to continue private piano lessons. So I continued private piano lessons all through junior high and high school, and just developed my musicianship the best that I could. I got to play some really, really cool pieces in high school. I learned like fantasy impromptu when I was in high school. I don't think I can play it anymore though. Oh. I don't think I can do it anymore. It's been years, but yeah. And other cool pieces like that. And towards my senior year of high school, I really, really got serious about going into music. Now, I thought when I was a senior in high school that I was going to become a film composer. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to become like a professional pianist because only the people who are like crazy, crazy, crazy good can really have any success at doing that, you know, or work in an orchestra or anything like that. I thought I wanted to become a film composer. And it wasn't so much that I really wanted to become a film composer. It's that I thought that that was the only way I could ever make a living doing music, to be honest with you. And so I applied for Arizona State University for their composition program. I learned 4 different classical pieces from different time periods. By the way, during this whole time, I also learned guitar, and I also learned drums. I learned drums when I was a kid. My parents bought me a drum set for Christmas, like a small little drum set. And I learned guitar in junior high. I took a class and learned guitar through that, and then obviously bass guitar from that. And so I had like, you know, the end of high school, I knew that. And so I had like those 4 instruments, and I was like, I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna major in music composition, and I'm gonna become a film composer. That's what I thought I was gonna do. And I got in to the School of Music at Arizona State, so I attended there. I attended Arizona State for 4 years, and the funny thing is that I took a film composing class when I was at ASU, and I absolutely despised it. I absolutely hated the film composing class that I took for a few reasons. Film scores are just not my thing. I mean, I love some film scores, but I don't like to write them. I rather write songs. I'm a songwriter. I'm not as much of like I'm going to compose a 30 to 60 minute to 90 minute, you know, feature film score, you know, short score or something. I'm just more of a songwriter. I would rather write these short songs that are compact with lyrics and can really hit you hard, rather than just writing background music for a film. And that is, by the way, I don't want to say just that, like that diminishes it. I think it's an incredible thing that people do that. It's very, very, very hard to do. And some people are legitimately and genuinely amazing at that. An incredible thing that people do that. It's very, very, very hard to um but it just was not my thing, and I found that out through that class. I also am not an introvert. I'm more of an extrovert, and I did not like spending, you know, pulling all-nighters sitting in a computer lab by myself, you know, trying to write film scores, like, and just sitting at a computer tweaking things. Like, it just was not my thing. I do that now when I produce our songs, but it's again shorter pieces of music, and I just do much better with that. And so yeah, took the film composing class my sophomore year in college, did not like it, and was like, dang, I don't know what I'm doing now. I know that I am, I know that I'm going to be a musician, but I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. And I was kind of searching that out. I, experimented with, writing for musicals, and music theater. And that went okay, but I didn't feel like I could express my values, my Christian values, or be who I was, who I truly was. And so, towards the end of college, I wrote a paper on the current state of the Christian music industry. And that is where I had to go and listen to a lot of current Christian music. That was around the year 2017, 2016, 2017. And I hadn't really listened to Christian music that much in like 8 to 10 years. And so I had no idea what was currently popular in Christian music. And when I heard it, I was just discouraged. I just heard a lot of songs that were very cookie cutter, that all kind of sounded the same. And I was like, okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm supposed to write the Christian music that I want to hear. And that was kind of where the idea for Zoetic was born, was my senior year of college. I was probably like 20, 21 at that point. And so, yeah, as far as how my musical experience was in college, I mean, by and large, I loved college. I loved majoring in music. I loved being a composition major. But I had a little bit of trouble because when I came in, my classical technique was not quite to the level of some of these other players. Like, I could play fast and I had good technique, but some of these kids had been taking classical lessons intensively since they were like 3 years old. And even though I started piano at 3 years old, again, it was mostly chords and it was mostly self-taught. I did learn how to read music, but I didn't have like that intensive like classical instruction at that age. And I was in studios, piano studios, with kids who had. And so I felt very inadequate. I felt very behind in terms of like being a classical player. I felt like I also was more than just a classical player. And I don't mean that in any sort of bad way, but I just mean that I could play by ear. I had this gift to play by ear. I could hear a song and just go play it. And I don't just mean melody, I mean chords. I had the ability to take a song and transpose it into any other key that I wanted. I had these things, these skills that I felt like were not valued in the classical music studio, because it was all about like, how well can you play Chopin, right? And again, I could play like fine, but not maybe to the advanced level of some of these other kids. So I didn't feel like I fit in the classical music world, like the piano studio world. I felt like I was more improvisational. I felt like I was better, at soloing or playing by ear. But I had no jazz training when I got into college. I knew how to play like, basic chords and maybe add some extensions onto them. But that's only like beginning jazz theory. Like, I didn't have jazz theory. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to fit in this classical world. Even though I know less about jazz right now, I feel like that is a better fit for me. And so I made the decision very early on in college that I was going to take every jazz course that I possibly could. Now, I was not a jazz major. I was a music composition major, and that was more classically oriented. But I was like, you know what? I think jazz, I just feel like I fit there better. I feel like I can be more myself. And so I took every jazz class I could. I took jazz piano private lessons, along with classical piano private lessons, pretty much all throughout college. I took jazz composition. I took jazz arranging. I just any jazz class that I could. I took all the extra credits that I possibly had. And instead of like graduating a year early or something, I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to more or less minor in jazz piano. And so I just intensively learned jazz. And at the time, I was also learning a lot of music theory because I was a music composition major, and that aided in that and went along with that. So, but the first 2 years, I was not good enough to join a jazz band or a jazz combo at ASU. I just wasn't, I just didn't have the jazz vocabulary. I just wasn't comfortable enough in that world. And so I kept trying out. I kept auditioning the first 2 years that I was in college for these jazz bands, these jazz combos, and kept getting rejected. And, having to do other things. And eventually, my junior year of college, the professor at the jazz school finally gave me a chance and let me join a jazz band, a jazz combo. And that is really when my jazz training that I had had the past 2 years in college started to it just started to kick in, and I experienced more growth, I would say, as a pianist in the last 2 years of college than I had ever had before, because I was learning like actual like jazz music in these combos in these bands. And so anything that's like I learned obviously some standards, but I also the particular combo that I joined was a Latin jazz combo, and so I was learning a lot of Latin jazz. Even some popular Latin jazz stuff like Stevie Wonder. And then I think it's like, yeah, there, that's the chord. Anything from that to like Mamba In. I taught myself some of the Charlie Brown Christmas soundtrack. So that's from Charlie Brown Christmas. And again, so I was in this Latin jazz combo. I was learning jazz standards, in my jazz private lessons. And I was teaching myself Charlie Brown Christmas on the side. So I was just immersing myself in the world of jazz. And I just became obsessed with it. I became obsessed with it the last 2 years in college. And it just started to infiltrate my writing. It started to infiltrate like my compositions and my songs. And so I think honestly that even though the jazz courses were not required for my music degree, they weren't. They were the single most pivotal thing that I could have done in college, because now that language, the language of jazz permeates everything I do. It permeates everything I play for the most part, unless I'm trying to really, play something classical or something like that. And it permeates everything that I do with Zoetic and all of the songs that I've written and Emma and I have recorded together. So hugely, hugely important and pivotal that I took so much jazz in college. And so that's a little bit of my musical background. Then when I got out of college, I got married right out of college. I mentioned that last time. And my husband and I are, well, now we're doing better, but at the time, my husband and I were very, very, very poor because I was trying to make a living as a musician starting up out of college. Which is obviously very difficult to do. It's not an easy industry to make money in by any means. My husband is a pool cleaner and repair guy, and he was building up his business. And now he has a fully built up business, but at the time it was not very built up. And so, anyways, got married right out of college, and yeah, we did not have hardly any money. But I am so grateful to my husband Jacob for believing in me, and allowing me to start what would become Zoetic about a year out of college. I started to write the songs and record the songs in my house or my apartment for what would become the first Zoetic EP, which was released in 2018, a year after I got out of college. And then in 2020, I hired Emma. That's a whole nother story that I will probably tell in a different live stream. But anyways, yeah, I've been rambling long enough, but that is my musical background. That is all of that condensed. I would say as a musician, I really strive to be well-rounded, to use music theory in everything that I do, and to I really value improvisation, just going off and, doing my own thing. Like, that was me improvising, is what I felt like playing, just right now at the time, right? And I'm grateful that God has gifted me with the ability to do that. To just sit down at a piano and play what I feel. It is the greatest blessing that I could ever ask for. And so, yeah, that's my musical background. I'm going to look through, see if there are any comments, questions, concerns. Hopefully, no concerns. And I hope that everything has been running. I have not been checking because I'm trying to get away from doing that. But, anyways, let me just look and see if there's anything. Y'all are a blessing. Teach me music. I want to be cool and musically smart. Philippe, you're so cool. You play bass. Bass is like the coolest. It is the coolest instrument ever. You get to play slap bass. I don't know how to play slap bass. Hi, greetings from YWAM. YWAM. Oh no, somewhere in France that I can't pronounce. Mars. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. Guys, I have terrible French pronunciation. Greetings from France. Hello. Hello to whoever is from France. I hope to be a film composer myself. Well, good. Be a film composer because I was not a good one. I did not like it. I much rather write songs, and that's how I still feel to this day. Would I ever write like a film score? I mean, maybe. I did score a play once. That was about 90 minutes. I think I wrote like something like 40 minutes of music or something crazy like that, and it was hard to do. So that is not what I would want to do at this point. I would much rather write songs. Speaking of which, we have two of the singles from our upcoming EP out. I should say that we have 2 of these singles from our new EP out now. One of them is called Calling. It sounds like this. That's how that one sounds. And then our other one that's out is Show Me. I'm going to see if I can put some electric keyboard on here. And pull back up OBS. This is Show Me. That's our second single that came out, Show Me. Go check them out. We are also doing fundraising for the album. I must mention, we are doing fundraising for the album. If you go to our saved stories under New Creation, you should see the details for fundraising. If you donate $40 or more, you get some pretty fun perks. You get all of the songs sent to your email as WAV files, as well as the scratch tracks, so you can hear what they sound like in progress. And you get the final versions before they come out on Spotify, which is pretty awesome. In addition to that, you have a choice between either getting a 5-minute FaceTime thank you call from Emma and I, or I believe getting you have a choice between either getting that would be for the US only, but yes. So there's some really cool details about fundraising, and you can find that again in it's like the highlights. Yes, thank you. The highlights, the saved story highlights under New Creation. Anyways, I think that's going to be it for me today. That was my musical background. Now I can refer anyone to this video, whoever wants to hear the long version. And in the future, I will be talking more about like stuff within Christian culture, but I thought it'd be fun to share a little bit of my background today instead. So, yep, that's going to be it for me. Have a great week, guys. Have a blessed week. Last thing I'll say, please be praying for me. I have tendonitis in my foot. It is deeply unpleasant. It is like really, I mean, I can walk, but if I walk any sort of distance, particularly if I run, my foot is in a lot of pain. I don't know if any of you guys have ever had tendonitis in your foot. It is awful. It is miserable. And so, just pray for healing from that. I have my foot all wrapped up like I'm a mummy or something, and with KT tape and stuff. Create a jazz tune inspired by the Shroud of Turin. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know what that is. Like, I actually don't know what that is. Oh, no. Is that like a theological thing? I should know that if that's the case. That's going to be really embarrassing. I'll have to look into that. It seems like it's probably a theological thing. I've heard the name, but anyways, yeah. I'm really sorry. My English is terrible. I wish I'd studied more. Hope you have a nice day. I'm from Vietnam. I mean, your English seems pretty good to me. Your English is certainly better than my Vietnamese is. I don't know anything in Vietnamese, so, that'll, I honestly don't think it's that bad. So, anyways, oh, jeez. Okay. I don't know what the Shroud of Turin is, but I will look it up, and I'm sure I will feel nice and dumb, right after I do, because, that's how it goes. Thank you for praying for my foot. Yes, tendonitis, foot tendonitis. It's, I didn't even know you could get tendonitis in your foot. I thought you could only get it in your arms. It says it's the burial shroud that held the body of Jesus. The burial shroud that held the body. I'm gonna have to look into that. I'm gonna have to look into that. I feel like I should know that as the resident Christian artist here, but all right, I am gonna go before I say anything else that is dumb. All right, Hope you guys have a wonderful week. I will see you next week. This is so fun, guys. I love doing these live streams. And next live stream, I will be responding to your questions and your comments and all that stuff even more. I didn't do it a lot today because I had to go on a big long monologue to get all my thoughts out about my background so I could remember everything. But in the future, I will respond to your questions and your comments more than I did today. So rest assured.